Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this Small Business Committee meeting to order. Today, our first order of business is to consider our views on the Small Business Administration's budget for fiscal year 2013. And after considering the views and estimates, we'll move into marking up legislation on improving the environment for small businesses interested in federal contracting. The President has often talked about the importance of small business to the American economy. Despite this, the Administration could provide no one to defend the budget in a timely fashion, so views and estimates could be submitted to the Committee on the Budget by March 9, 2012. The President held a press conference in which he touted the need to restructure services offered by the government to help small business. Of course, this presumes that the best way to help small businesses is for the government to offer services, and instead the best way, I think, to help small businesses is to revise the tax code, reduce unnecessary regulations, and provide certainty with respect to health care costs and lower the deficit. The budget certainly does none of these things. Given the significant debt owed by the Federal Government, the budget fails to take the opportunity to provide a roadmap for making the hard choices needed to reduce spending on small business programs without undercutting the capacity to provide the most necessary services to assist the growth of small businesses. For example, the budget requests an additional $10 million for entrepreneurial outreach and education on programs not authorized by Congress or even examined by Congress. Even if the goals of such programs are worthy, it is irresponsible for the SBA to make such requests given the existing budget situation. Nor does the budget provide a roadmap on efforts needed to reduce spending by the SBA. The largest increase in the SBA's budget is for subsidies needed to operate the guaranteed loan programs so small businesses can obtain scarce capital. A key component in determining the amount needed is how much the government can expect to recover if the loan defaults. The SBA provides no path to improve such recoveries or plans for revamping the computer systems to manage these loans. Even though the President did not offer a budget which made hard choices and no one from the SBA was available to provide insight into the budget, the views and estimates before us today do make hard choices and provide a roadmap for a leaner but still robust agency that can provide necessary services to small businesses. The views and estimates letter recommends eliminating a variety of duplicative programs at the SBA, and even with these cuts, the SBA will necessarily face an increase in their budget. The budgetary increases stem entirely from the costs of operating the SBA's conventional and disaster lending programs. Yet the President's budget made no recommendations on processes that might reduce such costs. The views and estimates letter before us provides such a path through ways to increase recoveries after defaults and requiring that programs which are supposed to operate without any appropriation actually do so. Additionally, the letter before us requests that no appropriations be allocated for pilot or other initiatives until the SBA is a modern, fully functional loan management accounting system. Despite these cuts, the core functions of the SBA to make capital available, provide advice, and increase utilization of small businesses as Federal Government contractors are preserved. The sensible approach outlined in the views and estimates letter will represent this Committee's effort at reducing the Federal spending. And now I would be very happy to recognize the Ranking Member for her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Today's consideration of the Committee's views and estimate on the SBA budget is occurring as the economy is showing increasingly promising signs of a recovery. GDP growth surpassed expectation last quarter and rose 3%, the fastest pace since early 2010. And other positive signs are everywhere. American factory output grew at the fastest rate in 5 years, while consumer confidence hit a one-year high. All of this good news is finally translating into job gains as employers added 1 million workers to payrolls since July, leading to the biggest decline in the unemployment rate since 1984. At 8.3%, unemployment is the lowest in almost 3 years. But the truth of the matter is that much more needs to be done on the job creation front, and this is where SBA plays a crucial role. The agency's near-term blueprint for accomplishing this goal is its FY 2013 budget request of $1.1 billion. The most notable aspect of this submission is the rising credit subsidy costs for the 7A and 504 programs. With the Federal Reserve reporting that lending standards have still not recovered to pre-recession levels, it remains difficult for many businesses to access capital. As a result, SBA lending programs are as important as ever, and these costs, while rising, are absolutely necessary and appropriate to preserve this source of capital. Unfortunately, to help defray these additional expenses, the agency imposes a 10% across-the-board cut on proven programs that actually generate taxable revenue and pay for themselves. all the while continuing to seek funding for unauthorized initiatives. Programs like the Small Business Development Centers are successful and not only creating new businesses, but also the jobs that come with them. While we understand the need to cut programs, it makes little sense to reduce the very programs that work while increasing spending on programs that are untested. For instance, the SBA chooses to spend on countless unauthorized initiatives, including $6 million on the Business USA website, $3 million on clusters, and another $7 million for a new veteran effort. There are at least 6 other such unauthorized programs included in the SBA's FY 2013 budget. In times of tight budgets, the agency should not be cutting results-oriented programs like SBDCs and then proposing to spend millions on ideas that have not been vetted by Congress nor objectively reviewed. With regard to the majority's views and estimates letter, I support several of its provisions. It recommends the elimination of many of the aforementioned unauthorized programs. It is right to terminate them, as other established programs show long-term benefits to the taxpayer. However, there are some areas of concern. By proposing to eliminate funding for the Veterans Business Outreach Center program, it is limiting the ability of the 190,000 veterans of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan to start their own businesses. These men and women have unique skills and needs, which justify the Veterans Program approach. Many of these centers are run by veterans themselves, which make them an appropriate means to provide training to would-be veterans entrepreneurs. In addition, while the majority talks about its concerns that the SBA is too concentrated in Washington, D.C., it fails to provide concrete steps for distributing personnel. It simply proposes to reduce both field staff and headquarters staff alike, which does not necessarily lead to a more diffuse SBA. Instead, the agency's personnel structure should be evaluated and steps taken to ensure that all areas of the country have access to the SBA resources they need. As we all know, disagreement on priorities in the agency's annual budget is not unusual. Although Chairman Graves and I do not fully agree on our views, it is rather obvious that we both believe more work needs to be done at the SBA in setting its priorities. Put simply, continually spending taxpayer money on priorities not approved by Congress is not a good use of scarce resources. While the recent downturn required many business owners to reimagine their company to stay competitive, the SBA should be taking similar steps. This means recommitting itself to existing programs that work while reducing waste and fraud in other key initiatives. Doing so will bring tangible benefits to small businesses while also making sure that taxpayers are given a positive return on their investment. And with that, I yield back.
Are there any other members who wish to be recognized for a statement on views and estimates? The committee now moves to consideration of the views and estimates letter. The clerk will read the title of the document.
Views and estimates of the Committee on Small Business on matters to be set forth in the concurrent resolution of the budget for fiscal year 2013.
Without objection, the views and estimates letter is considered as read and open for amendment in its entirety. Does any member seek recognition for the purpose of offering an amendment? Views and estimates. Seeing none, the question is on adopting the views and estimates letter. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The views and estimates are agreed to.
Mr. Chairman,
I recognize the ranking member.
I would like to give notice pursuant to House Rule 11, Clause 2.1, that the committee's Democrats will be filing additional views with the Committee on Budget on the SBA's FY 2013 budget submission.
Absolutely, without objection. That's so ordered. Without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation and to make other necessary technical adjustments on the document considered today. All right. We now move to the markup of contracting legislation. Given that the federal government spends over $500 billion each year through contracts, this is an incredibly important market for small businesses. Improving small business opportunities for federal contracts is a triple play. Small businesses win more contracts, workers win as the small businesses create jobs, and taxpayers win because small businesses bring competition, innovation, and lower prices to save the government money. Recognizing that this is a crucial area for small businesses, over the past year, the committee has held 10 hearings or subcommittee hearings on federal procurement issues. These have resulted in 8 bills introduced by the majority, and this package has been supported by over 20 trade associations, such as the Association of General Contractors, Minority Business Roundtable, the Chamber of Commerce, the Financial Services Roundtable, National Association of Home Builders, Mason Contractors Association, the Sheet Metal and Air Conditioning Contractors, National Association of Surety Bond Producers, National Association of Small Disadvantaged Businesses, the U.S. Black Chamber, the National Women Business Owners Corporation, Women Impacting Public Policy, and American Institutes of Architects, and many, many others. Additionally, our minority just introduced 3 contracting bills, bringing us to a total of 11 contracting bills, which we are committed to marking up. Now, that is a testament to the bipartisan nature, I believe, of this Small Business Committee and to the issues that are obviously before us. Today, we're going to mark up the first 6 of these bills. And while we discuss each bill briefly before we mark it up, I want to emphasize how crucial it is that we have bipartisan contracting reform that's going to improve opportunities for small businesses. I look forward to working with all of you today to move these bills one step closer to law. And I now recognize Ranking Member Velazquez for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. With the federal marketplace accounting for $500 million annually, procurement policy can be a powerful instrument for job creation. One of the most effective things we can do in this area is ensure small businesses win their fair share of contracts and that more small businesses can get involved in the process. When large corporations win contracts, their existing workforce can take on the new work. However, when entrepreneurs are hired by the federal government, they bring on new employees, creating opportunities for working families. Reforming the procurement process can therefore help us create badly needed jobs without having to spend additional taxpayers' dollars. After all, these expenditures will already be made. The question is whether small firms can compete for them fairly or not. The fact is, the federal government's record on meeting small business contracting goal has been disappointing at best. The government as a whole consistently fails to ensure 23% of its contracting dollars go to small businesses, and agencies regularly fail to meet their individual goals, not only for small businesses, but other disadvantaged entrepreneurs like veterans, women, and minorities. Improving this process and empowering more small firms to grow with the government as a customer can be vital to not only the small business sector, but our economy as a whole. I thank the Chairman for working with us on this legislation, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you very much. Are there any other members who wish to be recognized for the purpose of an opening statement? Seeing none, we will move forward with H.R. 3850. We'll now consider, in fact, we'll go through all 6 of these contracting bills in the order listed in the notice, and copies of each of the bills have been provided. The first item is 3850, the Government Efficiency Through Small Business Contracting Act of 2012. I introduced this bill with Congressman Owens and Congressman Schilling to increase contracting opportunities for small businesses. This bill does this by increasing the business's prime contracting goal from 23% to 25%, which will result in approximately $11 billion more in prime contracts for small businesses each year. The bill strengthens subcontracting opportunities by instituting a statutory 40% goal when there was previously only an administrative goal of 35.9. The bill also clarifies how contracts should be counted for the purposes of the goal and does something small businesses have been clamoring for. It holds agencies accountable for meeting the goal. Specifically, it says that no senior executive at any agency is eligible for a bonus if the agency doesn't meet its small business goals. The changes made by this legislation will motivate agencies to meet their obligations to small businesses and improve contracting to the benefit of taxpayers and small businesses alike. I'd urge the committee to pass this important piece of legislation. I now recognize Ranking Member Velazquez for her opening comments on 3850.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The legislation before us makes significant changes to the federal small business goaling program. This effort, originally established in the Business Opportunity Development Reform Act of 1988, requires the government to attempt to annually achieve a certain goal for contracts awarded to small businesses. Unfortunately, since the goal was raised to 23% in the Small Business Reauthorization of 1997, it has not been achieved. The reasons for this are many. Agencies lack the tools and resources to effectively channel many contracts to small firms. For instance, only last year did we finally see a women-owned procurement program implemented, even though women received less than 4% of contracting dollars. Compounding this is an understaffed acquisition workforce, including a lack of PCRs and CMRs, who traditionally focus on increasing opportunity for small businesses, but are clearly undermanned. The result is that contract consolidations continue to occur, leaving smaller companies locked out of some of the most lucrative opportunities. In addition, it appears that what was once a goal may have effectively become a cap on small business procurement participation. 14 years is a long time to not achieve a reasonable goal, and even the staunchest small business advocates have to wonder if a goal is leading to agency underperformance in this area. Other problems plague the goaling program, including that the performance data and reporting mechanism are so error-filled that some years the goaling grades have been essentially meaningless. As a result of all these concerns, one has to question whether goals are helping or hurting our own goal of increasing small business participation in the federal procurement marketplace. While the legislation certainly attempts to get more contracts in the hands of small businesses, raising goals without providing agencies with the tools and resources necessary to achieve them might well fall short. Without such assistance as well as comprehensive procurement reforms, I am afraid that we will simply be back in this very room contemplating why agencies are still unable to achieve their goals. The truth is that small businesses need more than just goals to succeed in the federal marketplace, and I look forward to working toward that goal in the future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for a statement on 3850? Seeing none, the committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 3850. The clerk will report the title of the bill.
H.R. 3850, to amend the Small Business Act with respect to goals for procurement contracts awarded to small business contractors and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 3850 is considered as read and open for amendment at this point. Does anyone seek to be recognized? I think we're going to start with Congresswoman Hahn.
Thank you, Chairman Graves, for working with me on this important amendment. My amendment to H.R. 3850, the Government Efficiency Through Small Business Contracting Act of 2012, is a simple step towards ensuring transparency in government. It requires the congressionally mandated SBA report to Congress and the President also be made available to the public by publishing the report online. This simple sentence will make a world of difference in creating transparency and accountability in the SBA's mandate to give a bite at federal contracting dollars to the true backbone of the American economy, the real job creators, American small businesses. The American people deserve to see how we're empowering small businesses, and they shouldn't have to go any further than their computer to see whether or not we're living up to these goals. Thank you.
Okay, we're kind of going a little backwards, but will the clerk please read the amendment?
Amendment 1 to H.R. 3850, offered by Ms. Hahn of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and Ms. Hahn has adequately explained her amendment. Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment?
Thank you very much.
And with that, the gentlelady's amendment makes sense to me. The report on small business contracting should be made available online, so all small businesses and taxpayers can see it. So I support the amendment.
Thank you.
If there's no other further discussion on the lady's amendment being offered, all those we'll just open it up. That's amendment number 1, sponsored by Ms. Hahn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. The next amendment would be Representative Chu.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I have amendment number 2, and I want to thank you for including a robust reporting section on contracts awarded to small businesses.
Just bring it up, and we'll let the amendment be reported, and then you'll have 5 minutes. Report the amendment.
My lead.
Amendment 2 to H.R. 3850, offered by Ms. Chu of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The member is recognized for 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, Mr. Chairman, again, thank you for the robust reporting section on contracts awarded to small business. Until we have a good idea of how agencies are conducting their contract activities and an accurate report on who is getting the contracts, we cannot make the right changes to ensure that small businesses participate in federal contracting. I have a small and straightforward transparency amendment to offer under the reporting section. My amendment seeks to gain further transparency in the reporting process by requiring data on why the firms are considered socially and economically disadvantaged. The current data does not give enough detail about what firms are actually securing the contracts. By collecting this data, we can learn more about the firms that are currently receiving federal contracts. This amendment simply says that the reports by the administrator will also include the reason that the certification of the small business is considered socially and economically disadvantaged. Thus, we will get a better picture of the small and disadvantaged business category. Again, this amendment is simple and straightforward, and I ask for the committee's support.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? With that, when H.R. 3850 was drafted, it sought to increase transparency into who is receiving contracts and how they were receiving those contracts. The gentlelady's amendment furthers that goal, giving us additional insight into which companies are winning government contracts, and I do support the amendment.
Mr. Chairman, if
Yes,
I may.
absolutely.
I will encourage my colleagues to support this straightforward, common sense amendment. As we have seen with prior reports from GAO, many businesses that are not qualified as small businesses are getting contracts, and this is a way to add another layer of transparency.
So with that, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Chu. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have its opinion of the chair that the amendment is agreed to. Let's see here. Next amendment would be Representative Peters. Clerk, would you please read the amendment?
Amendment 3 to H.R. 3850, offered by Mr. Peters of Michigan.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. The members recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm certainly pleased that the H.R. 3850, the Get Small Business Contracting Act, raises the small business contracting goal from 23 to 25%. This is certainly going to mean a substantial amount of new business for small businesses. In fact, probably around $11 billion worth, which is an incredible accomplishment. However, my amendment would simply increase the government-wide goal for participation by small businesses that are owned and controlled by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. Currently set at 5%, it would move it up to 7.5%. While I recognize this appears to be a significant increase, it is one that is certainly very achievable. In fact, the SBA has reported that prime contracting achievement of almost 8% in 2010, and it was above 7.5% in 2009. So this amendment will simply ensure that the government continues its recent successes in contracting with small businesses that are owned by socially or economically disadvantaged folks. Meeting this goal for the socially and economically disadvantaged small businesses will certainly help us reach the overall goal of 25%. Certainly the bar of 5% has been met. It has been achieved and actually exceeded. This amendment makes sure that we don't backslide from our current levels, which are over 7.5%, and would urge my colleagues to put this benchmark in place, having already achieved the other one. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Does any other member wish to be recognized on the amendment?
Excellent. Excellent amendment.
Mr. Chairman, just quick, how do you define socially disadvantaged? I think there would probably be people that would place me in that category. How do you define that? Yes, Mr. Peters.
Gentleman's recognized.
Well, it is already determined in the legislation, so we're not adding a new definition that doesn't already exist in the statute. Basically, economic disadvantage is determined by personal net worth, which is outlined in the SB or in the legislation already. And social disadvantage includes a broad array of groups: African Americans, Hispanic Americans, Native Americans, Alaskan Natives, Native Hawaiians, or enrolled members of federally or state-recognized Indian tribe, Asian Pacific Americans, and members of other groups that have been designated by the SBA. So this amendment doesn't change any of those designations. It is simply it puts the goal, which has already been achieved, just sets that floor what we're already achieving, so we don't backslide from where we are.
Vasquez.
Yes, and I would like to say, Mr. Chairman, that I commend the gentleman's amendment. There are over 323,000 active profiles of businesses who have registered to contract with the federal government. Of this, more than 53% or 16% are self-certified or SBA certified small business disadvantaged businesses whose contracts are eligible to be counted towards this category. The current 5% goal really doesn't represent this business's participation in the federal marketplace. This amendment will ensure that the goals more closely mirror the market participation of this class of small businesses. Additionally, the federal government has met and exceeded the goal for contracts to this category of small businesses. By raising this goal, we are ensuring that we do not remain stagnant in awarding contracts to small businesses. And I will ask my colleagues to support this amendment.
Does any member wish to be heard? Yes. Cicilline.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I too want to compliment the sponsor of this amendment. And at a time when I think there is enormous empirical evidence that the divide between many communities in this country is growing wider and wider and becoming more and more challenging for new startup small businesses, and having just raised the goal to 25%, I think it's really important that we ensure that we at the same time raise this goal, and I want to compliment the gentleman for this excellent amendment and urge everyone to support it.
Any other member wish to be heard? Seeing none, as chairman of the Small Business Committee, I've tried not to favor one group of small businesses over another, and I don't want to pick winners and losers, and I want to help all small businesses compete. And right now we have one small business goal and 4 subcategory goals: women, service-disabled veterans, hub zone firms, and small disadvantaged businesses. Each of these subcategories of small businesses can compete for small business contracts. So they all win when we increase the small business goal. However, when we increase the small disadvantaged business goal, only about 9,200 firms benefit instead of the 350,000 small firms currently seeking to do business with the federal government. Indeed, this amendment would completely subsume the 2% increase proposal by H.R. 3850 and then take another 0.5%, reducing opportunities for firms that aren't small disadvantaged businesses. Therefore, I'm afraid I can't support the amendment. With that, the question is on the amendment by Mr. Peters. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, no. No. It's the opinion of the chairs that the noes have it. The noes do have it. Yes. Okay.
Request a record roll call.
Absolutely. Recorded vote is requested. Pursuant to Rule 10 of the committee's rules proceeding, proceedings on the bill and amendment will be postponed. What we're going to do is stack so that we don't get members hung up, because we've got a vote coming up here pretty quick, and then we'll try to get everybody back over, and we'll pick that up. So we have one recorded vote now on Mr. Peters. Next recognize, or with the clerk, we've got Ms. Elmer's amendment up on 3850. The clerk, please read the title.
Amendment 4 to H.R. 3850, offered by Mrs. Elmers of North Carolina.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Summers, you recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment directs agencies, including the GSA, to abide by small business contracting goals of the Small Business Act when using commercial leasing services. Small business brokers such as Carpenter Robbins, ICI, and Public Properties have had several projects in my home state of North Carolina. Recently, Public Properties provided support for the completion of a VA outpatient clinic in Wilmington, North Carolina, and a VA healthcare clinic in Charlotte, North Carolina. My amendment would allow these small business brokers to compete for these leases. That completion will in turn provide lower prices for the federal government and taxpayers. Further, these small brokers offer offer specialized services such as finding a hospital for the VA or a port for the NOAA. Under current law, GSA is not legally bound to follow small business goals to procure leases with non-appropriated funds. This amendment protects small business government procurement contracting opportunities by, 1, ensuring that the GSA must abide by the small business contracting goals outlined in the Small Business Act, as well as the amendments here in H.R. 3850, makes the SBA, and 2, ensure small business concerns are protected in commercial leasing. And I ask my colleagues of the committee to approve and support this amendment. Thank you.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Velasquez.
I strike the last word. In the broadest context, commercial leasing services can include the renting of equipment, automobiles, and trucks. It is also understood to include real estate advisory services. Given the breadth of this definition, it is curious that this committee will go on record to endorse the application of the Small Business Act contracting provisions to such commercial leasing services. At the very least, commercial leasing services should be defined, not just so members know what it means, but so this legally vague jargon is not applied in an unintended manner. In addition, the small business contracting provisions include several programs, including those for minorities, women, and veterans. Applying such set-asides, as well as the goal for these demographics, to private sector commercial leasing services could lead to unintended consequences. This could mean that we are calling for the establishment of private sector contracting goals, as well as requiring private sector transactions to be subject to federal set-asides for minority, women, and veterans. Given these concerns, I would like to yield to the gentlelady for the purpose of providing some clarification on her amendment. And I would like to ask the gentlelady if the intent to apply the small business contracting provision to contracts among private entities.
Well, the goal of this amendment is to allow some of the smaller entities, some of the small business entities, brokers, to be able to compete for some of these leasing projects that some of the larger entities basically are able to obtain.
Your amendment reads, it is the sense of Congress that the contracting provision of the Small Business Act shall apply to commercial leasing services. So it means private buildings in the private sector.
Basically,
and so reclaiming my time, in your amendment, it states that what I read, and this is not specific to contracts entered into by a federal agency with a commercial leasing agent. Therefore, this amendment could be interpreted that you are applying the Small Business Act contracting provisions from goals to set-asides to contracts negotiated between two private parties. So just to be clear, it is your intent to apply the minority and women set-aside programs and the accompanying goal for these demographic groups to commercial leasing services contracts?
What we can do is offer a clarifying amendment if that will allow your concerns.
Well, I would like to ask the gentlelady to withdraw your amendment and to work with the minority, and then when we go to the floor, we could work on the language.
Well, what I would like to do is vote on it and see where we are, and if we need to put forward a clarifying amendment, we can do so.
Could the council clarify what the amendment does?
Believe the intent of the amendment was to focus solely on awarding contracts to provide to commercial leasing services that obtained office space for buildings for the federal government.
But we are not here to discuss intent. We are here to discuss the language of the amendment.
Well,
it's not about the intent, it's what the language reads. It says, should apply to commercial leasing services.
And I would argue that in the context of federal government contracting, the commercial leasing services that we're talking about relates to public buildings. and the obtaining of leases on public buildings.
Could I ask the council to show me in the language of this amendment where it says public buildings?
It doesn't, but it's the definition of commercial leasing services is those services in which if I was the federal government and I needed office space or I needed some other type of office space, it's not a, it's a term of art, essentially, making the argument that it is a commercial lease in the same way that if I was in the private sector seeking office space, I was an attorney seeking office space, that's what I was.
Is that defined in the small business statute?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
What, the explanation, the definition of commercial leasing, is that defined in the small business statute, in the Small Business Act?
No, it is not.
Okay.
Would it be possible to, could we, while we take a break for votes, to perfect this? Is that possible?
From my end, that is agreeable.
Can you, while we, and we'll skip over, we'll try to get another one, we'll stop at the moment if you guys think you can work it out.
Would the gentle lady ask unanimous consent to withdraw the amendment?
If you want to, Summers, if you want to withdraw it, and then we'll come back to it, if you guys can perfect it over this vote series, whatever it is.
Okay, I would ask unanimous consent to withdraw at this time with
Okay.
that intent.
Try to work that out, and then we will come right back to it. So we'll postpone what we're doing on 3850. We'll move directly to 3851, which is the next order of business, the Small Business Advocate Act of 2012. The purpose of this bill is to ensure that the offices of small and disadvantaged business utilization within each federal agency have the clout to be effective advocates for small business concerns, and that they focus their resources in a way that helps small businesses compete for contracts. As the committee uncovered this year, some agencies have been selling small businesses short by making the director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization also serve as the Chief Acquisition Officer, Chief Financial Officer, and one of a half dozen other titles. In each case, the responsibility for small businesses got passed down to a lower-level individual, so small businesses lack the senior advocate envisioned by the statute. This bill addresses the problem by promoting the directors to a role where they are the peer of the senior acquisition personnel and requiring the small businesses be the director's primary responsibility. It also clarifies the types of assistance the office should provide and reinforces the role of the office when it comes to government-wide procurement policy. Again, I believe that this bill deserves bipartisan support. I urge the committee to pass it, and I now recognize Ranking Member Velazquez for her remarks.
I don't have a statement to make at this point, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, now the committee now moves consideration of 3851. Clerk, please report the bill.
H.R. 3851, to amend the Small Business Act with respect to offices of small and disadvantaged business utilization and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 3851 is considered read and open for amendment at any point, and I do have an amendment. Will the clerk please report the amendment?
Amendment 1 to H.R. 3851, offered by Mr. Graves of Missouri.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. What this amendment does is develop through cooperation with the ranking member and improves 3851 by adding minimum requirements for the position of Director of the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization. Specifically, it requires that the Director have at least 10 years of experience in government contracting and enumerates how this experience can be gained. Small businesses need strong advocates, so requiring that they have a base level of knowledge makes sense, and I urge the committee to accept the amendment. Are there any other members wishing to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, the question is on the amendment by myself, Chairman. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. Opinion of the chair is that the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. Now we have an amendment from Representative Hahn. Will the clerk please read the amendment?
Amendment 2 to H.R. 3851, offered by Ms. Hahn of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Congresswoman Hahn, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Velasquez. I'm offering this amendment because my hometown of Los Angeles is facing a severe unemployment crisis. And though it's improved over the past year, the unemployment rate is still 10.9% in Los Angeles, well above the national average of 8.3%. We know small businesses are the engines of our economic growth and the heartbeat of the American economy. It's these entrepreneurs who put Americans to work and fuel the innovation and development that has made this economy the best in the world. My amendment requires small business specialists to give priority to small businesses located in areas like Los Angeles where the unemployment rate is higher than the national average. This will ensure that assistance will be focused where it's needed most and fastest. Not only is this a win for small businesses struggling to succeed in ailing local economies, but it's a win for workers who have been unable to find work in the worst job markets in this country. Thank you.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? We have 12 minutes in the vote. It's been called. Seeing none, I think this amendment is going to encourage small business advocates to provide technical assistance in areas with high unemployment rates. And since the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization currently provides assistance to all small businesses, I do not anticipate this will take assistance away from any small business. Instead, it will help focus them on the fact that small businesses are our job creators. And it's going to help the overall economy. I do support the amendment. With that, the question is on the amendment by the gentlelady, Ms. Hahn. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Does anyone else wish to have an amendment? I don't think they are. Seeing none, then the question is going to be on agreeing to H.R. 3851 as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Mr. Chairman.
Yep. Yes. Yes. Who's calling? Yes.
Point of order.
Edie. Absolutely.
We don't have the redrafted amendment before us. We were going to do that afterwards.
That's the bill before this. We
Okay.
postponed that. This is the second bill we're going to try to run through. This is 3851. The one that was postponed with the amendment was 3850. Absolutely. No problem. It's the opinion of the chairs that the ayes do have it, and H.R. 3851.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I request a recorded vote.
All right. A recorded vote has been requested. Let's go ahead and dispense with this one. Clerk, please call the roll. 3851.
Chairman Graves.
Aye.
Chairman Graves votes aye. Mr. Barletta. Mr. Bartlett.
Let's roll.
Mr. Bartlett. Mr. Shabbat. Mr. Shabbat. Mr. King. Mr. King. Mr. Kaufman. Mr. Kaufman votes aye. Mr. Mulvaney. Mr. Mulvaney votes aye. Mr. Tipton. Mr. Tipton. Mr. Landry. Mr. Landry. Ms. Herrera Butler. Ms. Herrera Butler. Mr. West. Mr. West votes aye. Mrs. Elmers. Mrs. Elmers votes aye. Mr. Walsh. Mr. Walsh. Mr. Barletta. Mr. Barletta votes aye. Mr. Hanna. Mr. Hanna. Mr. Schilling. Mr. Schilling votes aye. Ranking Member Velasquez. Ranking Member Velasquez votes aye. Mr. Schrader. Mr. Schrader votes aye. Mr. Kritz. Mr. Kritz votes aye. Ms. Clark. Ms. Clark votes aye. Ms. Chu. Ms. Chu votes no. Mr. Cicilline. No. Mr. Cicilline votes no. Mr. Richmond.
No.
Mr. Richmond votes no. Ms. Hahn.
I like my amendment, but I'm going to vote no on the bill.
Ms. Hahn votes no. Mr. Peters.
No.
Mr. Peters votes no. Mr. Owens? No. Mr. Owens votes no. Mr. Keating?
No.
Mr. Keating votes no.
Are there any other members wishing to vote? Seeing none, report them.
11 ayes, 7 noes.
Vote is 11 ayes, 7 noes. The bill is favorably reported to the House, and without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical corrections on the document considered today. So ordered. When we come back, we're going to move on to, if we can, dispense with 3850. We'll try. If you all get it worked out. If not, we'll move on to 3891. And with that, we have 7 minutes, 52 seconds. Well, you got it up there. So we are recessed until as soon as we get back. So please hurry back.
Okay. We only have one vote. Should I leave this there? Okay. Oh, we have 5 votes.
Excellent.
Thank you very much. I felt the same way. Thank you. I appreciate your solidarity.
The committee will come back to order. Let's see, we're going to go out of order real quick while we get the rest of our members here, and we're going to now pick up H.R. 4121, the Early Stage Small Business Contracting Act. Let's see. Call the title up or what? Just can the clerk report the title?
H.R. 4121, to provide for a program to provide federal contracts to early-stage small businesses and for other purposes.
All right, without objection, the we'll assume that it's been read. The bill's been read, 4121. H.R. 4121 helps the early stage small businesses by removing the barriers to entry into federal procurement. Making sure that the smallest businesses have the opportunity to compete makes sense, and this bill does have my support. And with that, I'd recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for any remarks on 4121.
With the economy facing challenges times over the last few years, much has been stated about the power of small businesses to lead us forward. However, what is clear is that among small firms, those that generate the greatest number of jobs also happen to be in the earliest stages. In fact, recent research shows that these early-stage small businesses are responsible for the majority of job creation over the last 30 years. This means that it is imperative to not simply think about small businesses when we are designing policies, but more specifically those firms that show a greater likelihood to grow and create employment gains. With this in mind, channeling a small portion of the $500 billion federal marketplace to these very small firms is sensible policy. For this reason, I'm strongly supporting H.R. 4121. It builds on past effort to accomplish this goal, enabling agencies to award contracts based on the existing mechanism used in other government-wide programs, including the General Small Business, Hub Zone, Service Disabled Veterans, and the 8A. Such a move is appropriate, and as it will help educate and train these firms in government procurement practices, which is critical as they grow larger. I want to thank Mr. Schrader for his work on this issue, and also again recognize the chairman for his openness in working with us on this legislation. Early stage businesses are an important engine for job creation, and I look forward to advancing this legislation that will help these companies expand and grow stronger. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Velasquez. H.R. 4121 is now under consideration. We'll now consider amendments to it, which I...
Are you going to recognize him?
I didn't realize.
Yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I didn't realize.
Just a comment, if I may.
Left eye.
Appreciate that, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate consumer confidence is increasing, and it looks like the jobless claims are finally at a 3-year low. But more needs to be done, I think, for our truly small businesses. These early-stage small firms are critical to both our national economy and also to my home state of Oregon. We have 108,000 businesses, and more than 1/4 of those are very small firms with less than 25 employees. So helping these firms to mature and grow will be a key ingredient to getting our unemployment back and our economy back on track. From manufacturing, technology, and R&D, many new young businesses, I think, would be very well positioned to do business with the Federal Government. Unfortunately, they face significant hurdles tapping into the marketplace. They don't have an in-house contracting team. They lack the experience navigating the complexities of this whole process. So hopefully this legislation will make a huge difference in making it easier for these guys to start up. In fact, I think in Oregon alone, it's estimated that this could be 500 or more contracts for struggling small businesses, for hardworking Oregonians and ultimately Americans. So if we want to foster early-stage businesses, I would urge an aye vote, and thank you very much for hearing the bill, sir.
Absolutely. Does any other member wish to be recognized on 4121? Seeing none, it's now open for amendment, which I have an amendment to offer. Will the clerk please report the amendment?
Amendment 1 to H.R. 4121, Chairman Graves of Missouri.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. What this amendment does is it simply strikes a note to the current statute that's going to be obsolete and confusing if Mr. Schrader's bill becomes law, and I urge the committee to accept the amendment. Does anyone wish to be heard on the amendment? With that, seeing none, the question is on the amendment by myself, Mr. Graves, to 4121. All those in favor say aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Does anyone else have any other amendments? All right. Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 4121 as amended. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion of the chair is the ayes have it. The ayes do have it. H.R. 4121 is agreed to, and without objection, Quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. Okay, are we ready to go back? Just go back in line 3893. Okay, where are we at? Okay, now we'll get back in order. The next order would be 3893, the Subcontracting Transparency and Reliability Act of 2012, introduced by Mr. Mulvaney, which I strongly support the bill, and I yield to Mr. Mulvaney to speak on 3893.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Subcontracting Transparency and Reliability Act, H. 3893, addresses a number of small business contracting issues that we identified during our subcommittee hearings. First, it changes the limitations on subcontracting provisions from cost to price to make it easier for legitimate small businesses to determine if they are complying with limitations. The bill adds a penalty for small businesses that don't comply with limitations and cracks down on those small businesses that front for larger businesses. Also, the bill allows small businesses to team with other similar small businesses in order to complete the contract, giving more businesses the opportunity to learn and participate in the Federal contracting process. Secondly, the bill strengthens the prime contractor reporting requirements. This makes it easier for a contracting officer to determine if there are real subcontracting opportunities for small business and to catch and punish large businesses who are bad actors. These provisions bring additional transparency and reliability to the contracting process. Finally, the bill addresses the problem of insourcing, the subject of several hearings that we had. It's the process by which the government takes work currently awarded through private sector competition and converts it into work performed by Federal employees. The Act requires, or the bill requires, Federal agencies to publish their insourcing processes and give small businesses standing to challenge agency insourcing decisions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I now recognize Ranking Member Velasquez for her remarks on 3893.
No, I don't have any remarks on the bill. I have remarks on the amendment of Mr. Mulvaney.
Any other members wish to seek recognition on 3893? Seeing none, I support H.R. 3893 because it will make it easier for small businesses to comply with rules about how much of the work they must perform on a set-aside contract and make it easier for the government to catch businesses fronting for dishonest large firms, a practice commonly known as pass-throughs. It also improves opportunities for small businesses as subcontractors. And finally, it adds transparency to insourcing practices by requiring that agencies publish the process by which they make insourcing decisions. Again, I believe that this bill deserves bipartisan support, and I urge the committee to pass it. The committee now moves consideration of H.R. 3893. The clerk, please report the title.
H.R. 3893, to amend the Small Business Act with respect to subcontracting and insourcing and for other purposes.
Without objection, H.R. 3893 is considered as read and open for amendment at this point. Does anyone have an amendment? I think Mr. Mulvaney has the first one.
I do. We have a manager's amendment, Mr. Chairman. Does two small things. The Act, as originally drafted, codified the limitations on subcontracting for construction contracts. In speaking with the administration, however, we learned that this was traditionally done through public rulemaking and not through statute. So the manager's amendment resolves that. It removes the limitation on subcontracting for construction in statute and allows the administrator to continue the established practice of setting the limitations through rulemaking. It also provides some flexibility at the agency level to address small business needs in construction contracts. Finally, there is a technical change to further clarify that small businesses are the entities which have standing to challenge insourcing decisions.
We'll go ahead and I forgot to report the amendment. Clerk, please read the title.
Amendment 1 to H.R. 3893, offered by Mr. Mulvaney of South Carolina.
Okay, the amendment is considered read. Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Yes.
Thank you, Member Velasquez, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This amendment offered by Congressman Mulvaney will simplify the limitations on subcontracting for small businesses as it moves the calculations from cost spent to total price of the contract. Additionally, it significantly scales back the insourcing provisions of the original text. Without this amendment, any business will be able to challenge the decision of agencies to convert the performance of a function to Federal employees. At DoD alone, actions of more than $900 million worth of contracts will have been eligible for protest, $846 million being performed by large businesses. This will have been detrimental to the contracting process, as agencies will have to spend their time litigating cases rather than ensuring that functions essential to running their departments were being performed. However, under this new language, only small businesses will be able to challenge when functions that they are performing are converted to performance by Federal employees. At DoD, this will mean that only 6% of their insourcing decisions would have been eligible for protest. Small businesses can use this as a tool to ensure that functions being performed by small businesses are not being converted before those functions performed by large businesses. And with that, I support the amendment.
Thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez. Anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, this amendment was developed in a bipartisan manner with the ranking member. It does clarify the intention of the bill, and I think it's going to improve the process for small businesses, and it has my support. The question is on the adoption of the amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Next amendment is Representative Clark. And will the clerk please report the
Amendment 2 to H.R. 3893, offered by Ms. Clark of New York.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Ms. Clark, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Everyone here supports Federal contracting, and I consider myself to be an ardent, outspoken, forceful, and unapologetic advocate for minority women and veteran-owned Federal contractors. However, the provisions of this bill that my amendment strikes does nothing more than make it nearly impossible for Federal agencies to even have the option to insource without a prolonged delay, regardless of the reason for the insourcing. While there are parts of this bill that I find agreeable, I unfortunately cannot support it in its current form. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment, and I yield to my colleague and friend, Ms. Chu.
Thank you, Representative Clark, for yielding some time. First of all, I'd like to say that I appreciate Representative Mulvaney's efforts to improve subcontracting opportunities for small business. The hearing that we held together on subcontracting exposed a number of areas where small businesses were taken advantage of by the prime contractor. We were both dismayed at this, since subcontracting is an important entry point for small firms to get experience in Federal contracting. With this bill, the Federal subcontracting reporting system can track compliance with subcontracting plans so that contracting officers, SBA, and the Office of Small and Disadvantaged Business Utilization can be notified of any potential violations. This is a positive step forward for small businesses. However, I do support Representative Clark's amendment to strike the language in the bill regarding insourcing. The insourcing provision will expand legal standing to any small business contractor to challenge any agency's decision to insource any function when contractors already have legal standing sufficient to challenge agencies' decisions in the Court of Federal Claims as well as in the Government Accountability Office. This provision can delay decisions made by agencies until they are wholly made public for comment. Some functions of agencies are not appropriate for public consumption nor made for contract lawyers and procurement judges. Besides that, the National Defense Authorization Act has twice codified the use of insourcing as an effective tool to rebalance the workforce, to realign inherently governmental work, and to generate resource efficiencies. I agree that we have to do all that we can to support small businesses receiving Federal contracts, but I do not think that restricting insourcing is the right answer. Thank you, and I yield back.
Does any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman?
You want to go?
If he should go.
Mr. Mulvaney.
Very briefly, and I appreciate the comments. Keep in mind, the language that we're talking about here is fairly simple and straightforward. The language that they're seeking to strike in this amendment reads, it takes 15 seconds, a federal agency may only convert a function, that's the formal word for insource, may only convert a function that is being performed by small business to performance by a federal employee if, 1, the agency has made publicly available, after providing notice and an opportunity for public comment, the procedures of the agency with respect to decisions to convert. It's all we're asking is that these agencies will publish and give folks the terms and conditions under which they want to consider insourcing. We had regular testimony here, I think we did 2 separate hearings on this, about folks simply, small businesses, not knowing what rules an agency was going to play by, that they didn't know what targets they were trying to hit. They didn't know the conditions under which their contract might be insourced. And you could easily make the case that if we would simply publish these rules and let the small businesses know the terms and conditions under which they are up for possible insourcing, that small business could adjust their contract, adjust their services in order to keep the service being performed by small business. So I think in the long run, in the short term, this will continue to encourage the use of small business when it comes to government contract. Regarding the standing, I think the criticisms are fair, but I think they are more applicable to the original version of the bill. I think we solved many, if not all, of the standing, the potential abuses of the standing issue in the manager's amendment, which we have already adopted. So while I think it is a valid criticism, I think we have already solved that problem, and the standing issue is now limited only to bona fide small businesses who are actually impacted by the decision. So with that, I would encourage a yea vote on the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, I strike the last word. It has been clear today, insourcing has supporters on both sides of the issue. Proponents believe that private businesses can perform tasks more efficiently than federal employees. Contrarily, opponents believe that certain functions are inherently governmental and should be only undertaken by employees. For work being performed by small businesses, this issue only becomes more important because small firms themselves create jobs at a rate that far exceeds other sectors of the economy. In this regard, I recognize the efforts of the Chairman to put forward a manager's amendment to clarify that the insourcing provisions only pertain to small firms. In fact, prior to that change, 100% of agencies' insourcing decisions would have been subject to the bill's provision. Now, the scope has been dramatically reduced so that, for example, only 6% of the Department of Defense contracts are subject to the restriction. While reducing the impact of the bill by 94% is a good start, we need to continue to work towards ensuring that there is no impact at all. There is still work to be done to ensure that these protests do not simply create a web of costly litigation for agencies without the attendant increase in new jobs, except possibly for the attorneys contesting the protests. It is crucial that this new protest procedure do not simply waste scarce government resources, clog the GAO, and delay legitimate protests and provide no proven benefit to the taxpayers. With this concern in mind, I am supporting the gentle lady's amendment and urging a yes vote. However, it is important to again recognize that we have come a long way, and again, I want to thank the Chairman for truly minimizing the effect of this provision. With that, I yield back.
Is there any other member wish to be heard on the amendment? You want to clarify your position?
Yeah, other than to change my encouragement for an aye vote to a no vote. Yeah, I get the word wrong, and other than that, the sentiment remains the same. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See, any other members wish to be recognized? Well, this amendment would strip all the insourcing protections, I think, for the small businesses from H.R. 3893. And there seems to be 3 arguments against insourcing provisions. First, there's a question of whether the offices of small and disadvantaged businesses and the procurement center representatives should be even involved in the process. Frankly, I don't understand why this is an issue, because the administration's own Office of Federal Procurement Policy, SBA Administrator Mills, and the Director of the Minority Business Development Agency sent out a guidance last year directing the agencies to involve the small business representatives when insourcing small business work, and that's exactly what we're trying to do with this bill. Second, there's a question as to whether insourcing guidance should be published. Right now, I know of a business that may have its contract insourced this month for cost purposes, and they requested information on the contracting agency's insourcing processes under the Freedom of Information Act, only to have their FOIA request denied. A small business shouldn't be losing a contract under a secret process. Transparent, repeated processes must be required. Repeatable processes must be required. And finally, there's the question of GAO protests. The process that governs outsourcing allows the government employees to protest to GAO, and this provision would simply give small businesses the same rights. Since I know of small businesses that have lost their companies after insourcing decisions, they should have some due process right. And for these reasons, I cannot support the gentlelady's amendment, and I urge my colleagues to oppose it. With that, the question is on Ms. Clark, amendment to 3893. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes appear to have it. The noes do have it. With that, thank you very much. With that, we will move on to the next order of business. Are there any other amendments, I guess, before we close? Any other amendments? Seeing none, the question on is agreeing to H.R. 3893 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. It's the opinion of the chairs that the ayes have it. Ayes do have it. H.R. 3893 is agreed to. Without objection, quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. Without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation, make any other necessary technical corrections of the document considered today. Without any objection, that's so ordered. Next order of business. Next order of business is H.R. 3980, the Small Business Opportunity Act of 2012, introduced by Ms. Herrera-Butler and Mr. Schrader. I yield to Ms. Herrera-Butler to speak on 3980.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'd like to say publicly thank you, Chairman Graves, and to your staff for helping make this important bill, help us bring it before this committee today. I'd also like to thank Ranking Member Velasquez and further my partner in this effort, Mr. Schrader, for joining me in introducing this bipartisan piece of legislation, and all my colleagues who co-sponsored the bill. You know, I am pleased, Mr. Chairman, to introduce the Small Business Opportunity Act. This bill improves the acquisition planning process and empowers procurement center representatives, PCRs, that's what I'm going to refer to them as, to be better advocates for small businesses. This is going to mean more jobs and more economic opportunities in Southwest Washington, where I represent, and across the country. Procurement center representatives are small business administration employees inside federal agencies. So they're advocates inside these agencies directly responsible for ensuring small businesses get the opportunity to compete for federal contracts. They review federal contracts with the single goal of providing small businesses a level playing field on which to compete. Unfortunately, Mr. Chairman, PCRs are not given the opportunity to perform their jobs to the best of their abilities. Why, you might ask? At times, agencies fail to send those procurement documents for their review. When they do receive those documents, at times the review is the last step in the procurement process, meaning they get it once the package is almost complete. Everything's been all but finalized, but when the PCR actually receives it. So this limits the PCR's ability to meaningfully alter or improve the contracts that will benefit small businesses. So basically, it's keeping them off the table or not at the table. So instead of reviewing contracts, procurement center representatives often spend a great deal of time contracting personnel, training contracting personnel in various small business contracting programs. This task does not appear in their job description. So with only 58 PCRs across the country, Mr. Chairman, they certainly don't need to be spending their time doing other people's jobs. So perhaps the biggest obstacles that small businesses face when they're competing for contracts is the fact that PCRs are directed to specifically not review contracts on commercially available items or services. A commercially available item is anything an everyday person would be able to purchase from a store, anything from a box of pencils to a laundry service. There's absolutely no reason that small businesses should not be given the opportunity to compete for these contracts. Without proper input from the PCRs, many times they're excluded. So how do we fix this? Well, this bill, the Small Business Opportunity Act, changes this playing field. It levels it. The legislation clarifies that PCRs shall have access to all documents in the acquisition planning process. Further, they will now be consulted at the beginning of the planning process rather than at the end when everything's put together. and give it an opportunity to weigh in on behalf of small businesses throughout the development of each contract. The Federal Acquisition Institute and the Defense Acquisition University, which are already funded to educate a federal acquisition workforce, will be responsible for all the training, which means we're taking it off the PCR's plate, and it allows them to focus on their main goal, which is advocating for small businesses. Mr. Chairman, small businesses across the country are eager to compete for these contracts, for these federal contracts. There's over 900 of them in Southwest Washington alone, in my district. And when we have double-digit unemployment, and we know that small businesses are where they're the engines of our economy, they should be given the opportunity to compete. Not only will allowing them to better compete benefit the small businesses and the jobs that they're going to create, it's going to increase competition, which is going to bring down bidding prices, and the dollars saved on those lower bids are taxpayer dollars. So it's an efficient, effective use of this system, and the Small Business Opportunity Act reforms it in a very common sense way. So I urge my colleagues to adopt, and again, I thank the ranking member and the chairman and my partner in this effort, Mr. Schrader. I yield back.
I'm sure Mr. Schrader does. Mr. Schrader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just briefly want to express my support for Congresswoman Herrera Butler's bill. It simply clarifies the procurement process for small businesses through enabling the PCRs to do their job, and it's a good bipartisan bill, and hope everyone will vote for it. Thank you.
Are there any other members that wish to be recognized for a statement on 3980? With that, I support H.R. 3980. It does modernize the role of the Procurement Center representative. Doing so will ensure that we have qualified individuals supporting small businesses in a manner consistent with current procurement practices. It's also going to ensure that small businesses are considered throughout the acquisition process, not just at the end, which will increase small business opportunities. I believe that this bill deserves bipartisan support, and I urge the committee to pass it. The committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 3980. Clerk will report the title.
H.R. 3980, to amend the Small Business Act with respect to procurement center representatives and acquisition planning and for other purposes.
Without objection, 3980 is considered read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone have an amendment? And I believe the first one is Mr. Schilling.
Thank you, Chairman Graves and Ranking Member Velazquez. I also
hang on just a second. Will the clerk report them?
Amendment 1 to H.R. 3980, offered by Mr. Schilling of Illinois.
Without objection, the amendment is considered read. Mr. Schilling, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you again. Also, I want to thank Representative Herrera Butler and then Mr. Schrader for their bipartisan legislation on this issue. As we all know, PCRs are an important part of making certain that small businesses have the opportunity to compete for government contracts. They provide invaluable service, advice, and assistance to small firms during the sometimes lengthy and complicated procurement process. That being said, it is important that these advocates have the necessary training to advise small businesses. My amendment adds an important clarification for PCRs who have not achieved the certification requirements in this legislation. As currently written, I believe H.R. 3980 may result in the SBA having to let go of PCRs that do not meet the certification requirements in the bill. I fear this would harm small businesses by abruptly interrupting the process, by also interrupting this process, but also these PCRs could lose their jobs, which we don't need any more unemployment, of course. But my amendment would provide current PCRs with an additional time, 5 years, to receive the necessary certification and training to comply with the improvements offered by H.R. 3980 and help them properly assist our job creators. It's a good bill. I think it's a short, sweet amendment, and would hope to have your support on that. I yield back.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment number 1 by Mr. Schilling? With that, this amendment provides a phase-in period for requiring procurement center representatives to obtain federal contracting certification. I think this amendment makes sense. I do support the gentleman's amendment. The question is on the amendment offered by Mr. Schilling. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Next amendment would be Ms. Chu, would the clerk please report the title?
Amendment 2 to H.R. 3980, offered by Ms. Chu of California.
Without objection, the amendment is considered read. 5 minutes.
Mr. Chair, I'm supportive of the improvements that this bill is making to procurement center representatives and acquisition planning. Many of these common sense changes are long overdue. With the same thought in mind, my amendment would require training in small business prime contracting programs for PCRs, OSDBU directors, contracting officers, and business opportunity specialists, basically personnel involved in contracting and procurement for small business. The prime contracting programs include the 8A program, the Hub Zone program, the Service Disabled Veteran-Owned Small Business program, and the Woman-Owned Small Business program. It's surprising, but not all contracting officers and PCRs understand the requirements of the unique characteristics each business owner faces. By giving them this training on these businesses, these personnel can only be more successful in their work on behalf of small businesses.
Any other member wish to be heard on the amendment?
Well, I will encourage all the members to support this amendment. It's straightforward, common sense. It will add to the federal acquisition process and will enable those PCRs to really understand when to help small businesses. And I encourage support for this amendment.
Any other member wish to be heard? Seeing none, this amendment does clarify that training on the Small Business Act's contracting provisions means that all small business contracting means all of the small business contracting programs, and it requires that other small business contracting advocates, not just PCRs, have a federal contracting certification. Educating contracting officers and small business advocates is going to increase the quality of government contracting and the number of rewards to small businesses. I do support the amendment, and with that, the question is on the amendment offered by Ms. Chu. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Next amendment is with Mr. Richmond. Would the clerk please report the title?
Amendment 3 to H.R. 3980, offered by Mr. Richmond of Louisiana.
Without objection, the amendment is considered as read. Mr. Richmond, you got 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank both sides and the authors for bringing this bill. My amendment simply acknowledges the fact that we are losing a large number of our acquisition workforce, and this would request that the GAO look at that and see and report back to us on the impact that it's having on small businesses so that we can make sure that staffing levels in the future will not impact the sustainability of small businesses, and that's simply what it does. And I would ask everyone to support it.
Anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none. Seeing none, this amendment, it does require, just as Mr. Richmond pointed out, it requires GAO to report on potential retirements in the acquisition workforce and how they're going to relate to small businesses. When the workforce is inadequate, they tend to bundle contracts, and that's a real problem, as we have seen in this committee. And I do think this topic is worth further study, and I support the amendment. With that, the question is on the amendment by Mr. Richmond. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Are there any other amendments? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 3980 as amended. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. In the opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it, and H.R. 3980 is agreed to. And without objection, a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House. And without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical corrections to the document considered today, which is so ordered. So this brings us back to 3850. Is that correct? We do have?
Yes.
Okay.
Which has no amendments.
All right, I missed 4118. Next order of business. Next order of business is 4118. Then we will come back to 3850. Next order of business, 4118, Small Business Procurement Improvement Act 2012, offered by Mr. Kritz. 4118 addresses the problem of how the procurement programs of the Small Business Act apply to multiple award contracts and the role of the Small Business Administration in making those procurement policies. The Small Business Act never exempted multiple award contracts, but agencies have routinely acted as it did, despite the Government Accountability Office holding otherwise. This bill corrects that problem, puts the SBA on the Federal Acquisition Regulation Council, which is going to ensure that small businesses have a larger voice in federal procurement. This bill does have my support. Recognize Ranking Member Velasquez, or you want to go to Mr. Kritz?
Over the last decade, historically, significant trends have overtaken the federal procurement marketplace. While the government has nearly doubled its spending to $500 billion, the acquisition workforce that oversees these contracts has only grown by 10%. The result is not surprising. The use of multiple award contracts is growing rapidly, allowing agencies to award more dollars with less time and staffing resources. This is the future of the federal contracting. This type of contracts now represent nearly 30% of the federal procurement marketplace, and more than $40 billion are now awarded annually. When counting other types of multiple award contracts, the total dollar amount approaches $200 billion. Given these astonishing trends, it is absolutely critical that businesses are not left behind as these newer procurement vehicles expand and grow. Doing so not only gives smaller firms an opportunity to compete for awards, but also gives the government more suppliers to choose from. This improves quality and price competition and is the #1 reason this committee continues to fight to open up more federal contracts to small businesses. It is against this backdrop that I offer my strong support for H.R. 4118. At its core, the legislation recognizes that procurement practices are evolving, and this committee needs to act to ensure small firms are at the forefront of these changes rather than an afterthought. Importantly, it also places an emphasis on small business as the highest level of federal procurement policy, a change that is long overdue. I want to commend Mr. Kritz and also thank Chairman Graves and his staff for their work on this important piece of legislation. And with that, I yield back.
Does any other member wish to be recognized for statement on H.R. 4118? Absolutely, Mr. Kritz.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Ranking Member Velasquez,
St.
for...
Patrick's Day already?
There was a party today.
Okay.
We won't be here for St. Patrick's Day, so we celebrate early. I appreciate you noticing, and often. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member Velasquez, for all your work and for allowing me to present this bill. The federal marketplace, as you know, continues growing and is now approaching over $500 billion annually. Unfortunately, there is also a pattern of federal agencies regularly missing their small business procurement goals of 23%. The total value of federal procurement marketplace last year was $535 billion, with small businesses winning $92 billion, or a mere 17%, only three-quarters of their goal. About $17.5 billion in federal awards went to our Pennsylvania companies, which I represent, but less than 16% of that went to small firms, much lower than the national average. In short, we are letting our small businesses down, depriving them of opportunities that could create badly needed jobs. In Pennsylvania, we have about 485,000 citizens who are seeking work but cannot find it. By channeling more work to local entrepreneurs, we can help reduce those numbers, offering more Americans the opportunity they need to secure a strong, stable job. The Small Business Procurement Improvement Act takes several steps that will broaden small firms' participation in the federal marketplace. Currently, projects no larger than $150,000 are reserved for small businesses. However, given the inability of the government to achieve its 23% goal, more needs to be done to get contracts in the hands of small businesses. By raising this limit to $200,000, we can expand the number of contracts that are reserved specifically for small businesses. This means more opportunity for small growing firms, which translates into more jobs. Just as the size of contracts have changed, so too has the specifics of how they are structured. Today, federal agencies use a variety of complex vehicles to meet their acquisition needs. Agencies have the flexibility to purchase goods and services through multiple award contracts like those on the GSA schedule, or effectively enter into a contract with other federal agencies. As these types of arrangements grow more common, It is important that small businesses be able to win their fair share. This legislation would require that agencies begin setting small business contracting goals that apply to these new procurement techniques. The legislation also enhances the SBA's ability to advocate for small firms in the Federal marketplace. By ensuring entrepreneurs have a voice at the table, we can enhance SBA's ability to advocate for our nation's 27.5 million small businesses, including Pennsylvania's 1 million small firms. Taken together, these reforms will mean that more contracts flow to small companies, creating jobs locally and helping drive our economic recovery forward. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. I thank the Chairman and the Ranking Member once again and yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Kritz. Anybody else wish to be heard on the bill? The committee now moves to consideration of H.R. 4118. The clerk please report the title.
H.R. 4118, to amend the Small Business Act to provide for increased small business participation in multiple award contracts and for other purposes.
Without objection, 4118 is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. Does anyone wish to offer an amendment? I don't think there are any. Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to 40. Where are we at? Yep. Too many 41s. Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to 4118. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. Opinion of the chairs, the ayes have it. 4118 is agreed. Without objection, a quorum being present, the bill is favorably reported to the House, and without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation and make other necessary technical documents or corrections on the documents considered today. Okay, with that, we're going to go back to 3850 and clean it up, which we have an amendment by Ms. Elmers, which was to be worked out over the vote break. The committee now resume consideration H.R. 3850, in which further proceedings had been postponed to allow the gentlewoman from North Carolina to fix her amendment. For what purpose is the gentlewoman?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I do have a clarification to the amendment to be added on the end of the bill.
Would the clerk please report the amendment?
Amendment 5 to H.R. 3850, offered by Mrs. Elmers of North Carolina.
Gentlelady is recognized.
And I am to read the?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And I believe this is agreeable to the ranking member, and I thank all of the staffs for working on this on the break. It is the sense of Congress that the contracting provisions of the Small Business Act shall apply to the leasing of buildings and office space by the United States and shall not apply to any leasing transactions between private parties.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? I think the amendment has been distributed. Ms. Velasquez.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take this opportunity to thank the gentlelady for her flexibility in revising this amendment. I still feel like the amendment is still a solution in search of a problem, but at least now we know what the solution is. With that, I thank the Chairman.
Does anyone else wish to be heard on the amendment? Seeing none, the question before us is on the amendment offered by Ms. Elmers to, let's see, what was it? 3850. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. The amendment is adopted. Now we have one recorded vote that is pending, which is the Peters Amendment number 3 to H.R. 3850. Does the gentleman wish to be recognized?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. During the vote series, we had a chance to discuss this amendment with the Chairman and the Ranking Member. And it's my understanding there's some willingness to work on this issue further before this bill comes to the floor. And with that in mind, and in the spirit of goodwill of working on this issue, I would move to withdraw the amendment at this time.
Mr. Peters, you have my word. We'll work on. I'm more than willing to work with folks and try to figure something out and try to get things done, and be happy to work with you on it. So
appreciate that, Mr. Chairman.
Are there any other amendments? 3850. Are there any other amendments to 3850? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to.
Mr. Chairman, before you proceed,
Absolutely.
so just to clarify, we're going to be working both sides, and to include some type of language in the manager's amendment regarding Mr. Peters.
Yes,
Okay.
we are. So they got it. Anybody else wish to be heard? Seeing none, the question is on agreeing to H.R. 3850 as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. Without objection, quorum being present, the bill is favorably to be reported to the House. Without objection, the committee is authorized to correct punctuation, make other necessary technical corrections on the document considered today. Without objection, that's so ordered. I think that is everything. Have I forgotten anything? Why all the long faces? This was a good day.
Thank you.
This was a good day. With that, I appreciate everybody being here. It has been a long afternoon, but we got a lot of good stuff. We got more to come on this contracting stuff. We'll have another hearing in a few weeks, 2 weeks, and to finish this stuff up. But with that, thank you very much. I appreciate it. This hearing's adjourned.